Princess Diana. The Untold History of the Spencer Family. Princess. Diana is remembered around the world as the people's princess, a woman whose kindness, emotional honesty, and humanitarian work changed the image of royalty forever. But behind Diana's public story was another story. A much older story of a powerful English family, the Spencers, a family whose history was filled with ambition, tradition, wealth, political influence, personal struggles, and secrets passed down through generations. Before Diana became a global icon, before millions watched her wedding, before the world followed every moment of her life, she was Diana Frances Spencer, a daughter of one of Britain's oldest aristocratic families. The Spencer name carried centuries of history. The family's roots reached back hundreds of years, to a time when England was ruled by powerful noble families who gained influence through land, loyalty, marriage, and service to the crown. The Spencers were not always among the most famous families in England. Their rise was gradual, built through intelligence, careful decisions, and connections with the highest levels of society. The Spencer family story is not only about wealth and privilege, it is also about survival. Like many ancient families, the Spencers experienced victories and losses, great successes and painful tragedies. Their history was shaped by a changing England, an England of kings and queens, wars and political struggles, old traditions, and new ideas. The family became wealthy through land ownership and business. In earlier generations, the Spencers were involved in sheep farming and trade. Their success allowed them to move closer to the world of the aristocracy. In the 17th century, the Spencer family became more powerful. Their wealth expanded and their influence grew. They became connected with important political figures and royal circles. The family's position became even stronger when members of the Spencer family entered public life. They served as politicians, advisors, and supporters of the monarchy. Over time, the Spencers became associated with one of England's most famous country estates, Althorp. Althorp was not just a home, it was a symbol of the family's identity. For generations, Althorp represented the Spencer name, its history, its traditions, and its connection to British aristocratic life. The estate contained portraits, historical objects, and memories of generations who lived before Diana was born. It was a place where the past was always present. Growing up in such an environment meant Diana was surrounded by history from childhood. She was born on July 1st, 1961, into a world very different from the one she would later experience. Her father was John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, who later became the 8th Earl Spencer. Her mother was Frances Shand Kidd. Diana was the 4th child in the Spencer family. She had 2 older sisters, Sarah and Jane, and a younger brother, Charles. From the outside, the Spencer family appeared to represent the perfect image of British aristocracy. They had a grand home, a respected name, and a place among the country's elite. But behind the beautiful walls of Althorp, the family faced serious emotional challenges. Diana's childhood was affected deeply by the breakdown of her parents' marriage. At the time, divorce among aristocratic families was still a sensitive and complicated matter. The separation of her parents created pain and uncertainty for the young Diana. Many people who studied Diana's life later believed that her childhood experiences shaped the person she became. She developed a strong understanding of loneliness, emotional pain, and the desire to help people who felt forgotten. Diana was not known as the strongest academic student during her early years, but she had a natural warmth and sensitivity. She connected easily with people. She cared about others. These qualities would later become the foundation of her public image. Unlike many members of the royal and aristocratic world, Diana had a way of making people feel seen. She was able to communicate with ordinary people in a way that felt genuine. But before the world discovered Diana, the Spencer family itself had a complicated relationship with the British monarchy. For centuries, aristocratic families like the Spencers lived close to royal power. Their fortunes were often connected to their relationship with the crown. Marriage, reputation, and social position were extremely important. The connection between the Spencers and the royal family grew stronger when Diana entered the life of Prince Charles. But this connection was not simply a fairy tale. It was the meeting of two ancient institutions, the House of Windsor and the Spencer family. Both carried expectations, both carried traditions, and both carried enormous pressure. The marriage between Diana Spencer and Prince Charles was seen by the public as a historic moment. A young woman from an old English family was becoming the future queen. Millions admired her. Millions believed they were watching a modern royal love story. But Diana's journey would reveal the difference between public dreams and private reality. The Spencer family history helps explain Diana's personality. She came from privilege, but she also came from emotional complexity. She belonged to an ancient world of titles, estates, and traditions. Yet she became famous for challenging the distance that often separated royalty from ordinary people. Diana's greatest power was not her title. It was her ability to show emotion. In a world where royal figures were expected to remain formal and controlled, Diana showed compassion openly. She touched people's hands. She hugged strangers. She spoke about difficult subjects. She brought attention to issues that many people ignored. This was revolutionary. But to understand Diana completely, we must first understand the family that created her. The Spencer story is a story of ambition. It is a story of inheritance. It is a story of a family that spent centuries building a name and then watched one daughter transform that name into something known across the entire world. The Spencer family existed long before Diana. But after Diana, the world would never see the Spencer name the same way again. The history of the Spencer family did not begin with Diana. Long before she became one of the most famous women in the world, the Spencer name had already traveled through centuries of British history. The rise of the Spencers was not an overnight success. It was a slow transformation from a successful family of landowners into one of the most respected aristocratic families in England. Their journey reflected the changing nature of British society itself. In medieval and early modern England, families gained power through land, loyalty, and connections. A strong family name could open doors, but maintaining that name required careful decisions across generations. The Spencers understood this. They built their influence through intelligence and opportunity. One of the most important foundations of their wealth came from the wool trade. During earlier centuries, wool was one of England's most valuable resources. Successful merchants could become extremely wealthy, and the Spencer family used this opportunity to establish themselves. Their wealth allowed them to purchase large estates and enter the world of the upper class. But money alone did not guarantee acceptance among the aristocracy. The old noble families of England valued heritage, titles, and connections. To become part of this world, the Spencers needed more than financial success. They needed social influence. Through careful marriages and public service, the family moved closer to the center of British power. Eventually, the Spencer name became connected with politics and royal affairs. Members of the family served as important figures in government and society. They understood that influence came not only from wealth, but also from reputation. The family's connection to Althorp became one of the most important parts of their identity. Althorp, located in Northamptonshire, became the heart of the Spencer world. For centuries, generations of Spencers lived there, leaving behind portraits, letters, furniture, and memories. The estate became almost like a living history book. Every room carried stories. Every generation added another chapter. By the time Diana was born, Althorp represented both the glory and the pressure of being a Spencer. Children born into such families were expected to understand tradition from a young age. They were taught about responsibility, family history, and their role in society. Diana grew up surrounded by reminders of the past. The portraits of ancestors looked down from the walls. The old traditions continued. Family expectations were always present. But Diana was different from, many people in her social world. She was not interested only in status or appearances. She had a natural emotional intelligence. She noticed people's feelings. She was sensitive to sadness and loneliness. These qualities developed partly from her own experiences. The early years of Diana's life were complicated. Her parents' marriage became increasingly troubled. Her father, John Spencer, and her mother, Frances, separated when Diana was still young. For a child, the collapse of a family can create deep emotional uncertainty. Diana experienced the pain of watching her parents' relationship fall apart. Later in life, she spoke about the importance of family and the impact childhood experiences can have on a person. The separation also created a major change in the Spencer household. The children were caught between two worlds. They belonged to a wealthy and powerful family, but emotionally, their lives were not always easy. This contrast became a theme throughout Diana's life. She would often appear to have everything, yet she understood what it meant to feel vulnerable. After the separation, custody of the children became a difficult issue. The situation created tension between Diana's parents. Eventually, Diana and her siblings remained with their father. John Spencer later became the 8th Earl Spencer after his father's death. This meant Diana officially became part of one of England's most famous aristocratic families. Her title changed her position in society, but it did not remove the emotional struggles she had experienced. Diana attended several schools during her childhood and teenage years. Unlike some members of the aristocracy who followed traditional academic paths, Diana was remembered more for her personality than for academic achievements. She enjoyed activities involving creativity, music, and helping others. She had a caring nature that would later become central to her public image. Before becoming a royal figure, Diana lived a relatively quiet life compared with the fame that awaited her. She worked as a kindergarten assistant. This was significant because it showed a side of Diana that felt different from traditional aristocratic expectations. She was comfortable around children. She understood ordinary human emotions. She enjoyed being useful. These qualities later became important when she became involved in charity work. The world often imagined Diana as a princess who changed the monarchy, but before she changed anything, she was shaped by the Spencer family story. She inherited the strengths of her family: confidence, tradition, public responsibility, but she also carried the emotional lessons of her childhood. The Spencer family had spent centuries protecting their reputation. Diana would become famous for showing the world the human being behind the title. When Diana met Prince Charles, the meeting between the Spencers and the royal family created a new chapter. The ancient Spencer bloodline was about to become connected with the future of the British throne. But behind the excitement, there were questions. Could Diana survive the pressure of royal life? Could an emotional and independent young woman adapt to a system built on tradition and restraint? The answers would shape one of the most dramatic stories of the 20th century, because the story of Diana was never only about becoming a princess. It was about a woman trying to find her own voice inside a world that was centuries old. When Diana Spencer entered the world of the British royal family, she was stepping into one of the most powerful and traditional institutions on earth. The monarchy was not simply a family, it was a symbol. It represented history, continuity, and centuries of British identity. For Diana, becoming connected to the royal family meant entering a world where every action was watched, every word was analyzed, and every personal decision could become public news. But before she became a global figure, Diana was still a young woman searching for her own place in life. Her meeting with Prince Charles changed everything. At the time, Prince Charles was the heir to the British throne. His future role was already decided from birth. He had spent his entire life preparing to become king. The expectations placed on him were enormous. The future monarch was expected to marry someone suitable, someone who understood tradition and could represent the crown. Diana Spencer appeared to fit many of those expectations. She came from an old aristocratic family. Her background was considered respectable. Her connection to British society made her familiar to the royal world. But there was another reason people became fascinated by her. Diana seemed different. She was young, shy, graceful, and emotionally expressive. At a time when many royal figures appeared distant, Diana seemed approachable. The public quickly became interested in her. The media began following her story. A young woman from the Spencer family was becoming the center of worldwide attention. In February 1981, Diana and Charles announced their engagement. The announcement created enormous excitement. People around the world viewed their relationship as a modern fairy tale. The idea of a young future king marrying a beautiful young woman captured the imagination of millions. Diana's engagement ring became one of the most recognizable pieces of jewelry in the world. The ring featured a large blue sapphire, surrounded by diamonds. It was elegant, traditional, and instantly associated with Diana. But behind the public excitement, Diana faced a reality that few people understood. She was only 20 years old. She was entering a life where privacy would almost disappear. The transition from ordinary aristocratic life to global fame was overwhelming. Suddenly, Diana was no longer just a Spencer. She was a future queen. Every detail of her appearance became news. Her clothing, her expressions, her friendships, and even her body language were analyzed. The world created an image of Diana before truly knowing her. On July 29, 1981, Diana Spencer married Prince Charles at St. Paul's Cathedral. The wedding became one of the biggest television events of the century. Millions watched. The streets were filled with crowds. The ceremony represented hope and celebration. For many people, Diana represented a new generation of royalty. She seemed like a bridge between the old world and the modern world. But the reality of royal marriage was much more complicated. Behind the beautiful images, Diana struggled with the pressure of her new role. She entered a family with strict traditions and expectations. The royal system valued duty and control. Diana was naturally emotional and expressive. This difference would become one of the central conflicts of her life. The early years of the marriage brought major changes. Diana became a mother. In 1982, she gave birth to Prince William. 2 years later, in 1984, she gave birth to Prince Harry. Motherhood became one of the most important parts of Diana's identity. She wanted to raise her children differently from previous royal generations. She wanted them to experience warmth and normal human connection. Diana was determined that her son should understand the world outside palace walls. She took them to public places. She showed them different experiences. She wanted them to see people from all backgrounds. This approach was unusual for a royal family that traditionally kept a certain distance. Through her children, Diana began changing public expectations of royalty. She showed affection openly. She hugged her sons. She displayed emotion. To many people, these simple actions felt revolutionary. But inside the royal household, Diana's life was becoming increasingly difficult. The pressure of public attention combined with personal struggles created emotional challenges. The relationship between Diana and Charles became more complicated. Their personalities were very different. Charles had spent years preparing for royal duty. Diana was searching for emotional connection. Their differences became more visible over time. The media noticed, the public noticed, the world that once celebrated their romance began watching their difficulties. Yet during this period, Diana's influence continued to grow. She discovered a new role, not only as a royal figure, but as a humanitarian. She became involved in charitable causes. She visited hospitals. She supported people affected by serious illnesses. She brought attention to issues that many others avoided. One of the most important aspects of Diana's public work was her ability to remove distance. She did not simply stand beside people. She connected with them. She listened. She showed compassion. This changed the way many people viewed the royal family. Diana was proving that a person's greatest influence does not always come from power or position. Sometimes it comes from empathy. The Spencer family had spent centuries building a reputation of importance. But Diana created a different kind of legacy, not based only on status, based on humanity. Her story was becoming larger than the royal title itself. The young woman from Althorpe was transforming into a worldwide symbol. But the greatest challenges of her life were still ahead, because fame brought admiration, but it also brought pressure, criticism, and a level of public attention few people could survive. The world saw Princess Diana as a symbol of beauty, kindness, and hope. Millions believed they understood her life because they saw her photographs, her public appearances, and her charity work. But behind the famous smile was a woman facing enormous pressure. The reality of life inside the royal family was far more complicated than the public image suggested. Diana had entered a world where tradition was extremely powerful. The British royal family had survived for centuries by maintaining a careful balance between public duty and private life. Members of the family were expected to represent stability. They were expected to avoid controversy. They were expected to control their emotions. But Diana's greatest strength was also what made her different. She showed emotion. She connected with people. She allowed the public to see a more human side of royalty. This made her incredibly popular, but it also created tension. The relationship between Diana and the royal institution became complicated. The more loved she became by the public, the more unique her position became. She was not simply another member of the royal family. She became a global celebrity. The media followed her constantly. Every appearance became an international event. People studied her clothing choices, her expressions, and her interactions. The world wanted to know everything about her. For Diana, this attention was both powerful and exhausting. The same media that helped make her famous also created intense pressure. Photographers followed her everywhere. Newspapers competed for stories about her personal life. Her private struggles became public discussions. This was one of the most difficult parts of her journey. Diana wanted to use her position to help people, but she also wanted a sense of normal life. Those two desires often came into conflict. Inside the royal world, Diana's approach was sometimes viewed as unconventional. She believed that showing emotion could create connection. Traditional royal expectations often emphasized formality and distance. This difference created misunderstandings. Diana was learning how to become a princess while also trying to remain herself. Her charity work became one of the strongest examples of her influence.
She supported many causes, including people affected by illness, poverty, and social problems. One of her most important contributions was changing public attitudes toward people living with HIV/AIDS. During the 1980s, there was widespread fear and misinformation surrounding HIV/AIDS. Many people avoided physical contact with those affected. Diana challenged this fear. When she publicly shook hands with someone who had HIV without wearing gloves, the moment received worldwide attention. The message was simple but powerful. People needed compassion, not fear. This became one of the defining moments of her public life. Diana understood something important, that sometimes a small human gesture could change how millions of people think. Her influence did not come from making speeches alone. It came from action. The Spencer family history had always been connected with public responsibility. Generations of Spencers had served society through politics and public roles. Diana continued that tradition, but in her own way. She turned attention into awareness. She used fame to highlight people who were often ignored. But as her public influence grew, her personal difficulties continued. The marriage between Diana and Charles became increasingly strained. Their differences became harder to hide. The relationship that once represented a fairy tale became a symbol of the challenges of public life. The media began reporting on problems within the marriage. Rumors spread. Public interest increased. The private struggles of two people became a worldwide story. Diana's emotional journey during this period was complicated. She was trying to fulfill her role as a princess, a wife, and a mother, while dealing with enormous expectations. Her sons, William and Harry, became a central part of her life. She wanted to protect them from the pressure she experienced. She wanted them to grow up understanding kindness and responsibility. Many people later observed that Diana's parenting style influenced how the next generation of royals approached public life. She believed that a royal child should understand ordinary people. She wanted her sons to see the world beyond privilege. This was another way Diana changed traditions. She challenged the idea that royalty had to remain distant. She showed that compassion could exist alongside responsibility. But the more Diana became a symbol of change, the more difficult her position became. She was admired by millions, yet she often felt alone. She belonged to one of the most famous families in the world, but fame did not remove personal struggles. The Spencer family story had always contained both achievement and difficulty. Diana carried both sides of that history. She inherited a powerful name, but she also carried the emotional experiences that shaped her. Her journey was becoming a story not only about royalty, but about identity, pressure, love, and the search for happiness. The princess who seemed to have everything was still searching for something simple, a life where she could be understood. And as the years passed, The gap between the public Diana and the private Diana became impossible to ignore. The world was about to witness one of the most dramatic chapters in modern royal history. The story of Princess Diana was never only the story of a princess. It was the story of a woman born into an ancient family, raised among tradition, and transformed by a world that watched her every move. The Spencer family had spent centuries building a name connected with power, history, and British society. But Diana gave that name a meaning that went far beyond titles and estates. She turned the Spencer legacy into a story about compassion. As the years passed, the difficulties in Diana's marriage became impossible to hide. The relationship between Diana and Prince Charles had changed from the hopeful beginning that the world once celebrated. The pressure of royal duty, public attention, and personal differences created a growing distance between them. In 1992, the separation between Diana and Charles was announced. For many people, it marked the end of the fairy tale image. The world had once watched a young woman become a princess. Now the world watched her struggle to find herself again. But this period also revealed a new side of Diana. Away from the expectations of a future queen, she began creating her own identity. She was no longer only defined by her marriage. She became a powerful, independent public figure. Diana continued her humanitarian work with even greater focus. She supported causes that reflected her belief that society should care for vulnerable people. She spoke openly about issues that many public figures avoided. Her honesty made her different. She was willing to show that even someone with wealth and fame could experience pain, uncertainty, and personal challenges. This openness changed the way people viewed famous figures. Before Diana, members of royal families were often expected to appear perfect. Diana showed the world something different. She showed humanity. One of the most famous moments of her later public life came through her work against landmines. Diana visited areas affected by landmines and brought international attention to the dangers faced by ordinary people after conflicts ended. Her involvement created global discussion. She used her influence to focus on people who often had no voice. This became the true foundation of her legacy, not the crown, not the title, the people she helped. In 1996, Diana and Charles officially divorced. The divorce ended their formal relationship, but Diana's influence continued to grow. She remained one of the most famous women in the world. Even without the future title of queen, she had become something much larger. She became a symbol. The Spencer family had always been connected with history, but Diana became part of world history. Her life also showed the complicated relationship between fame and privacy. The attention that allowed her to reach millions also created intense pressure. The media followed her constantly. Her personal choices became public conversations. The search for photographs and stories became a major part of her final years. In August 1997, Diana traveled to Paris. Her life was still being followed by photographers and media around the world. On August 31st, 1997, Diana died after a car crash in Paris. Her death shocked the world. Millions of people mourned someone they felt they personally knew. People who had never met her felt connected to her because she had shown emotion and kindness so openly. The reaction after her death demonstrated the extraordinary impact she had created. The world did not only mourn a princess, it mourned a person who had made many people feel seen. The Spencer family, which had existed for centuries, was forever changed. Diana's passing became one of the defining moments of modern history. Her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, carried forward her memory in different ways. The values Diana emphasized, compassion, understanding, and helping others, continued through their own public work. The Spencer name remains connected to Althorp and its long history. But when people hear the name Spencer today, many immediately think of Diana. That is the unique power of her story. A family can build a legacy over hundreds of years, but sometimes one person can redefine what that legacy means. Princess Diana's life contained contradictions. She was born into privilege, yet she understood loneliness. She became famous, yet she searched for privacy. She entered a world of tradition, yet she helped change it. She was a princess, but people remembered her because she acted like a human being first. The untold history of the Spencer family is not just about castles and titles and ancestry. It is about generations of people who shaped a name. It is about how family history influences identity. And above all, it is about Diana, a woman who transformed personal struggles into compassion for millions. Her story continues because the world still remembers what made her different. Not perfection, not power, but humanity. The Spencer family gave Diana her roots. Diana gave the Spencer name a new meaning. And decades after her death, the legacy of the people's princess continues.